Welcome, everyone, to this episode of First Thought Wrong. As usual, I'm Johnny, and this is Brian. And today we have a special guest, Tim, who's going to be talking to you. Before we do, Brian feels inferior again because he's got, one beard sitting next to him and then a Tom Selleck mustache on the other side. He can't do either, and he gets a little hurt about
It's
this.
crazy.
He gets a little hurt about this.
Ouch. The baby face.
So Tim is we're real happy to have you here. Tim has used the Never Alone Recovery Program. Never Alone, of course, is the sponsor of First Thought Wrong, and Brian talks about Never Alone Recovery at the end of every episode. And so, Tim, why don't you tell us what your experience with Never Alone was like? Tell us how it worked and how it worked for you.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank you guys and express my gratitude for, you guys inviting me on the show. Without my recovery, without the support, I wouldn't be sitting in these chairs today. So, back in 2016, 2017, my mother was struggling, with how to deal and cope with, a loved one that's in the household and, causing all kinds of chaos and running amok as we do best. And I don't know where she got, the lead to get into Never Alone Recovery or the resources for it. But it helped her out a lot. And she gave me a contact there, and I kept in touch. I called when I was desperate and needed a bed. I was in and out of treatment, every other month back then. This contact got me into LSSI in the city, provided me with a ride to Haymarket, for a walk-in. My insurance was, far and few in between my policies. I was, not keeping up with that stuff. It's a real rough times back then. But getting into treatment and the support, the check-ins that I got, I got a wristband, that said Never Alone Recovery on it. And I actually wore it until 2019. I lost it when I relapsed out of a treatment center in California, but they were there for me, and more importantly, they were there for my mom. She had a safe room to go into and a safe support group that she could, let it all out with and connect with other, family members and mothers that were going through the same thing. And I think there she established how to segregate enabling from supporting, and had a very firm boundary with that. And like looking back at it now, it was one of the best things she ever did for me was like cut off the emotional support. I mean, the financial support got cut off, in my early 20s, a while back. But later on in my 20s, I still had that emotional support. I still could pull on her heartstrings and learn how to manipulate and get things. And, I don't need cash. I need a, Vanilla Visa gift card because I need groceries. And, I would get the Vanilla Visa gift card and then go to the card shop or the pawn shop to sell it for less than what it's worth and go and get my fix. But I think she learned how to manage her emotions, through all of that as best as possible. I know she got real dark and real depressed, watching me go through what I was going through, and it really helped her kind of set up her own little program and cope, right?
Dude, that's so amazing. I want to back up. I want to back up a little bit. And we talk about, what gets us to drinking and drugging frequently. And a lot of times it's, parents were drunks and drug addicts. And, that leads to children being drunks and drug addicts, but not all the time.
Right.
And it sounds like your mom wasn't.
No.
Tell us a bit about how you started and, and kind of the relationship between mom and you starting, if you will.
So my mom was real strict on smoking weed. And this was back when I was 12, 13 years old. It was not allowed in the house because it was still illegal then.
Just an FYI, moms should be strict on smoking weed when you're 12 and 13.
Yeah, right. Oh, 100%. Absolutely, 100%. But I kind of resisted that, and I kind of lashed out and, kind of indulged more, kind of like had a fuck you attitude.
Don't tell me what to do.
Right,
I know best at 12.
Right, exactly. And so that the relationship back then was good. It was healthy. She was very supportive. She was very adamant about me keeping up with my grades, staying out of trouble. But there was just that one thing, like I couldn't smoke weed, and all my friends were doing it and all that stuff. So I fell into the resistance trap, that fuck you mentality of I'll do what I want and I'll do it when I want to do it. Which caused problems, caused a lot of chaos in the house, a lot of screaming, yelling matches, and, nothing really ever got too physical, slamming doors and stuff like that. But it escalated, and then it escalated into, personally, it escalated into more hard drugs, pills and party drugs, cocaine and stuff like that in my mid-teens. And started getting in trouble at school, mom showing up to the principal's office, trying to, go to bat for me and all that stuff. And then I got kicked out of school, high school, for smoking weed before school. Didn't have it on me. Didn't have, any residue, no roaches in my car, no nothing on the property. I knew those rules and I followed them. But I stashed my stuff across the street at the Dunkin' Donuts. Girl I drove to school wrote a statement out against me and signed it. And, got kicked out of school senior year. Was looking at some football scholarships. And my mom didn't go to bat for me then. And so I kind of gained a resentment, I guess you could say. And then it developed into, the Schedule I drugs, the heroin, the cocaine. And I had to choose the household lifestyle, the family lifestyle, being a good member of society and a member of the household, or choose the dope fiend lifestyle. And I chose the dope fiend lifestyle. I, went from friends' houses, couches, jumped around, was able to afford a little apartment by myself for a little bit there. But then it got bad, then it got real bad. I was about, this was after my first DUI at 21. It got, because I was placed on restrictions through the court, I couldn't smoke weed. I was in and out of jail for smoking weed. And I'm like, well, let's switch it up a bit. How can I still get high and not go to jail anymore? So I'd use for, 20, 24, 25 days out of the month. And then when court would come up, I would cut back. I'd go through withdrawals, all that stuff, escape it. And it was just the constant struggle of insanity that we go through. And
Where was Dad? You talk about Mom a lot. Where was Dad?
so my mom and dad they never got married. when I was younger. I had a weekend dad, and my mom remarried when I was 13. So I was an only child until I was 13 years old. And I had my 2 little sisters. She married a former policeman for Alsip on the south side. And, he was the stoic, hard-headed individual that, he was a cop, and I was the criminal in the household. So we kind of separated our relationship, at an early age. He helped me out, though, a lot, too, financially bailing me out of jail and being there for me, pulling his cop card out at the police station a couple of times. But those ran out, by the time I was 19. And, I had to face these charges and all that stuff on my own. But yeah, good family, grew up in a really good household. My 2 little sisters, they're wonderful. My mom, my dad, they're wonderful. Your typical all-American family, we don't have a white picket fence or anything like that, but, we live good, and, I don't, I think my addictions stemmed from the feel-good behaviors. I indulged a lot in, adrenaline, and I seeked a lot of adrenaline as a kid. And then once I found it in drugs, it was like, oh, I don't have to seek adrenaline anymore. I could just, consume this.
Manufacture a feeling.
Right. And so, yeah, and then, just that wasn't my family wasn't used to that, So not like placing blame or anything like that, but I felt black sheeped, I felt that I didn't fit in. I had a stepdad, I had a different last name. I had, a weekend dad who was an alcoholic. So it was like 2 functioning, dysfunctional families that I grew up in. And I was the dysfunctional one. I was the dysfunction in the family. I didn't have a structured way of life. I kind of ran on chaos and fueled by it and adrenaline and feel-good feelings, behaviors, across the board. Women, gambling, drugs, your typical story.
Do you think a more structured environment would have kept you from doing the things you were doing? Because what it reminded me of is like in recovery and 12-step meetings and stuff, we give suggestions.
Right.
Because 9 out of 10 times, if you tell an addict what to do, they're going to do the opposite on purpose.
Yeah.
So do you think that would have made a difference? Or if you still would have been like, no, created that chaos and those resentments and did what Tim wanted to do?
I think the structure would have done good. I really do. I think, my sponsor tells me a suggestion means you better fucking do it.
Yeah. I like your sponsor.
Right. And me too. That's why I chose him. He's he's a lovely man, and he's got a good life. And
so I really like that you said that. My sponsor tells me what to do, because I always said that's what I needed in my life, is somebody to tell me what to do. Because if it's left to my own devices, right, I'm going to make the wrong choice. Kind of like the podcast.
First thought wrong.
First thought wrong, right? And, I always did well in treatment or jail.
Yeah.
Situations like that, because I was told when to eat, sleep, and shit.
Yeah.
And I could follow that. But if it was like, all right, what do I do today? I was like, I'm going to burn my life to the ground.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah, 100%. The door's locked in treatment and in jail.
Yeah.
You either do what they tell you to do or it gets worse. And I don't know if it can get any worse sitting in a cell or sitting in treatment thinking about what you did to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a little bit more structure. I think a little bit more you know, supportive program, you know, would have helped. You know, I think because the chaos I provided into my family, sure, they didn't know what the hell to do neither, you know, and that's where Never Alone stepped in. You know, it took my family a long time to get there, you know, just like it took me a long time to step into recovery. But we learn through our mistakes, and, you know, when desperation reaches its bottom, you know, you reach out for help. And, you know, just grateful that Never Alone was there for my mom and for me through all that, because who knows? Who knows where we would be, you know? I don't regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it, so.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing because it sounds your mom. You know, Al-Anon is a wonderful organization, and you know, and what their meetings are few and far between. You know, and you know when you're at your wit's end, you know, and you don't know what to do, and it's like, oh my God, what do I do here? My son's a drug addict, you know, and you know, and having a supportive, you know, person on the other end of a phone that introduces you to other supportive family members who are going through the same thing. It's enormous, you know,
Yeah.
and that's Al-Anon too. Al-Anon is a beautiful thing, you know, it really is. It's fun. I just spoke at an Al-Anon meeting and, you know, and there was like 25 or 30 people there. And here I am, you know, I felt kind of like the enemy.
Right, right.
I was kind of like the enemy, but by the end of it, you know, it ended really well, and you know, lots of you know, just kind of explaining what an alcoholic and a drug addict is to people. You know, that's enormous. You know,
Yeah.
we suffer from an allergy that says for 72 hours, my body physically craves alcohol and drugs. And then after that, it's mental obsession. And when does the mental obsession end? Never. You know, as long as I think that alcohol and drugs will solve my problems, as long as I'm utilizing alcohol and drugs to make my decisions, you know, as long as that's in there, the mental obsession part is enormous. And you know, and we've talked a lot about, you know, post rehab. You know, people get out of rehab where they've got that structured environment, feeling good, 28 days clean. They all of a sudden the doors unlock and they get back out and life is life. And you know, that's where that mental obsession really takes a hold. You know, and it's like, okay, you know, I'm alone in an apartment, or I'm moving back to mom's basement. I don't have a job. You know, everything that you could possibly think of, all these overwhelming thoughts, you know, the mental obsession says alcohol and drugs will solve these.
Yeah. Left
You
to my
know?
own devices, right?
You know,
Yeah.
that's it. And, you know, so that's, you know, the all of the things that Never Alone does and is doing, the whole, you know, keeping in touch, you know, accountability and being involved, and not just the recovering person's life, but also the life of the family. You know, that's if you've got a supportive cast that wants to see you do well, you know, let's everybody get involved, you know.
Right.
That's and it's awesome. I really think that is a huge motivator. You know, it's not going to solve everybody's problem.
No.
You know, everybody's mental obsession and decision making is their own. But you know, if we can alleviate here and there,
Yeah.
you know, that's where it really shines.
Well, that's, you know, I think that's where we found the inspiration. You know, that little spark of light was through Never Alone. You know, we've seen people that have gone through the battles, gone through the struggles. You know, I'm speaking for both me and my mom. And they got through it, you know, and like seeing that and hearing their stories and getting that support and that hand, you know, reached out to them, to us, you know, was vital, you know. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here today if somebody didn't walk through the path that I went through, of destruction, and stepped into recovery and shown me what a beautiful life I could live, you know. But it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of willingness, it takes a lot of willingness to reach out for help.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of willingness to step out of your dark little mental depression, or your insanity, to say, hey, this is enough. Like, where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah. That's why vulnerability is so important,
Yeah.
right? Because it's such a hard thing to do, because it's like, oh man, I'm scared. And for me, like, scared of rejection. If I ask for help and somebody in my most critical moments looks me in the eyes and says no, like, what am I left to do, right? What am I going to do? Typically I'm going to crumble and go get high. And, that's where the gift of desperation came in. Like, the way I was living, the way we've all lived at one point in our life, an active addiction. It's like, what could be the worst thing? Even if they say no, I'll ask somebody else. And I'll keep asking until I get that help, because the way I'm living now is too painful. It's too painful, that the uncomfortable feeling of saying, I need help and I don't know, I don't have the answers. That's so much, it's so less painful than continuing to live like we live.
Yeah.
So that's what it was, right? Asking for that help and being willing to take those suggestions and get that help and stay on the path, regardless of the overwhelming feelings, regardless of the fear. I always say, do it scared.
Yeah.
Because I've done a lot of things through this process scared. I don't know, at least in active addiction, right? Like, I was comfortable in the chaos of not, because I knew how it was going to turn out.
Turn out, right.
I knew I was either going to jail, going to die. I was going to commit lots of crime. Recovery, I had never lived that life, so I didn't know. So it was scary and uncomfortable, but I did it anyways. And today I've got a life.
Yeah.
I've got friends and relationships.
Right.
That's
I think that's the superpower that we carry, as recovering addicts and alcoholics, is the resiliency, of climbing those mountains,
Yeah.
and like going through the valleys, and we don't stop, and then finally we find what works and we stick to it, may change up a couple variables as life goes on, because life gets lifey sometimes,
Yeah.
but it helps us remain resilient, and I don't know. I'm just grateful today, guys.
This everything you guys have been talking about. Consistent sobriety, consistent recovery. Whatever word you want to use, to me not using drugs, me not drinking alcohol, and me making better decisions. Right? There's all these different things, but continuous sobriety equates to continuous humility. And you guys just both kind of defined that, and having the willingness, being at that bottom, to ask for help. And, people when they think of humility, they always kind of just think, they throw God in the equation. But humility is asking help from everyone. And, if I ask for help and I get a no, I'm going to ask for some more help,
Yeah.
and the more I ask for help, the more, dependent I become upon, my meetings or God or, whatever, the better I become, and it's when I admit powerlessness, I admit that defeat, that I can actually then start to grow. And it isn't until then, because as long as I don't have that humility, as long as I don't ask for help, I'm going to do it my way. And my way is just what you said: drinking, using drugs, going to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my way, and it was fantastic. And when I can ask for help and have humility and continue doing that, continuous sobriety, I'm telling you, it's synonymous with continuous humility.
Yeah. See, and humility to me is when you're acting or living or present with humility, you're removing ego. And ego is a big part of my problem. I'll keep it on me. because I thought I had all the answers, right? I thought I knew better. I thought I was smarter or better or different. I was unique, you know. Nobody's experienced what I've experienced, and I played the victim a lot. But like ego, I've always heard it said like edging God out. You know, if I'm acting out in ego, it's all about self. And what's addiction? Self-centeredness, self-seeking. You know, it's all about me, what I want, what I need, what I think, how I feel. And when I'm acting in humility, I realize I'm not the center of the universe.
Right.
And then that allows me and opens me up to say, I don't know. Help me, John. Help me, Tim.
Right.
I don't know. You guys have been through it. I don't know how to get through this situation without acting a fool. And that's you know, like's always said, the closed mouth doesn't get fed, or the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? When the wheel's squeaking, you know it needs some attention. So when I'm talking about, hey, I need help, that's where my help comes. But if I don't say that, nobody can read my mind. Nobody knows I'm struggling with whatever I'm struggling with until I say it. So that's what happens in recovery, and I watch it. And of course, the gifts of recovery are endless for me. You know, the relationships I got back, you know, having a bank account and a home to live in and a car with the same 4 tires on it, right? That I didn't get buy used down the road.
Matching tires.
Insurance, stuff like that. You know, those are victories. But I think one of the biggest moments of gratitude that I have on a daily basis, because it shows me it works, is the people that I see step up in their own lives through suggestions and help from others. You see them walk through the door broken, beaten, scared to share, don't read very well because they're nervous and they're stuttery. And then they come in and they stick with it. And whether it's a month later, whether it's a week later, whether it's 6 months later, you see that light click back on, and you see that confidence develop. And like, those are the things I need to see, because I can see it in you guys, but I struggle to see it in myself because I beat myself to death. I'm still no good. I'm still less than in my mind some days, not all days, but I have those moments of insecurity and fear and doubt. And when I can see it happening in others, it allows me to see it through them and myself. And it's very rewarding.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Tim, let's stay on this topic. Let's stay on gratitude. You know, tell us, so since you've found recovery, since you've gone through the program, since you've got this, let's talk about life since then. You know, give us what your kind of gratitude list, if you will.
Man, you know, I gotta put my higher power at first on top of the list. You know, I couldn't have gotten through the obsession. I couldn't have found, you know, any of the other staples and principles of recovery, you know, without building a relationship with him. You know, and then you know, my family, we're whole. I'm not a black sheep anymore. I'm a black swan. But I look pretty good in the family now, you know? And I think building back those relationships, you know, it means the world to me. It means the absolute world to me, you know? I have a 18-month-old son, and my mom and my sisters are watching him right now as we speak. And like, man, without my recovery, without God, I wouldn't have this. You know, I wouldn't have a child. I wouldn't have a car. You know, a restricted driving permit because I have 3 DUIs and was revoked for 15 years. I got it back after 7. You know, I'm grateful that I'm reminded of my recovery every day. Every day. You know, when I grab that breathalyzer in my car, you know, I'm grateful for the privileges that I've gained back in my life. I'm grateful to be a part of such a wonderful community and society in recovery, to where I'm now, I still reach my hand out for help. Don't get me wrong, you know, but I'm grateful that like I can reach my hand out to somebody and help them, work with them and help get them on a better track, and, you know, help build back their relationships with their family and stuff like that. I mean, man, I'm grateful I'm able to play baseball again at 34 years old. I played for a men's league up in Northern Illinois. And yeah, that's fast pitch baseball. We played against a guy who pitched like Nolan Ryan on Sunday, and he was probably throwing low 90s. He froze me in the batter's box, and I just watched the ball go right across the plate, the middle of the plate too. It was a juicy slider, and I walked back to the dugout with a smile on my face because I was like, oh, he got me, he got me. And I don't know if I wasn't like, so mentally stable, without drugs and alcohol, probably would have threw my bat, probably would have, screamed some swear words while little kids are in the stands and stuff. But I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful I got to strike out looking. Like that. That was like kind of like related to like I'm grateful for my past. I'm grateful for my struggles. I'm grateful for all the hard times and just the everything, man. Everything comes with gratitude now. The small things, especially. Teach my boy how to sniff flowers, and then he's sniffing flowers all day long. Even pictures of flowers, he wants to smell them now. Grateful that I get to be present. Present with you guys. Grateful I'm on this podcast. I got a job. We're not only 40 hours a week, we're 50 hours a week. Got some overtime going on, a little extra money in my pocket. Grateful I could pay my car insurance off in a year advance, not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. My phone's paid off for the year. I tell my sponsees that, as soon as I get them, like, hey, you don't got to worry about me never picking up my phone. My phone's paid off for the year. That's what recovery does for us.
Yeah.
When you got to scrape together change to go, buy a $20 throwaway from Walmart so we can call the plug and, stuff like that. I mean, it's just grateful to be a part of life, man, and actually have a purpose in it and know my purpose, being a son again, being a big brother, being a grandson, I can give back the help to my grandparents when, they're getting older. They're in their 70s and they live on a big property, and so I'm a maintenance man up there, but I'm grateful I get to give back the blessings that they gave me growing up. Just grateful for who I am today and what recovery did for me, and really grateful to see what's in store. I look forward to seeing, what this comeback will look like in the future and stuff, as long as I keep doing what I'm doing, somebody, it was explained to me that like whenever somebody asks for something in recovery, you ask when and where, so that was today, Brian asked me to come up on the podcast, and I said, okay, what time and where,
Yeah.
and, we had a little scheduling, we had to change a little bit, but that's what we do. We adapt, we change, we improvise, and hopefully excel through it, so I'm grateful to see where you guys are going to go, with this podcast and stuff. Hopefully it gets some views. Hopefully it blows up. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. The whole goal here is that if we can help one person, if one person hears something that gets them to another day sober, that's what this whole thing is about.
Yeah.
And so just from us to you, thank you for
thank
coming out, for sharing your story, for sharing your experience with Never Alone Recovery. So if you have a problem, Never Alone Recovery might be an answer. So Brian, you want to give us a little?
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure thing.
So you guys helped me stay sober today because I drove underneath a bridge. That was the street that I first picked up on heroin. First time I ever did heroin was off of Torrance Avenue. And I drove underneath that bridge and I was like, reminded of how far I've come and how much I've gained back. And like, I mean, that was 2014. So everything in between, I had a little flashback and, really got to kind of soak in the moment, on the way here. So, I'm grateful that you guys got me to stay sober today.
Love that. Thank you for sharing.
Awesome. So here at Never Alone Recovery, we're a free resource. We help you find treatment, sober living, detox. If you need a therapist, a counselor, we can connect you with all those resources, regardless of your ability to pay, regardless of whether you have private insurance, Medicaid, Medicare, we can help you with that. Reach out to us at 1-855-831-9996, or you can check us out on Facebook, Never Alone Recovery, as well as neveralonerecovery.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Tim, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Be well.